Why is Hogwarts so behind with the times? Are the school's paintings actually alive? And what makes Dumbledore an incompetent headmaster? Let's try to get to the bottom of these confusing mysteries. The Harry Potter universe is littered with interesting objects and artifacts. Who doesn't want to fly around on a broomstick, store their memories in a pensieve, or keep fragments of their soul in Horcruxes so they can live forever and usher in an age of darkness? That being said, some of the magical stuff in the wizarding world is kinda pointless. Take the Remembrall, for instance. What's the point in a stone that lets people know they've forgotten something when it doesn't actually tell them what they've forgotten? No one cares about Remembralls, but most of us would want a Marauder's map.
So you mean this map shows
Everyone.
everyone?
Everyone. Where they are, what they're doing, every minute of every day.
It would allow us to avoid the people we don't want to see and know where everyone is at all times. Still, can we address the elephant in the room? Why didn't Fred and George notice that Peter Pettigrew was hanging around with Ron? Were they just so focused on their own exploits that they didn't bother to check in on their kid brother? If they did, they could have stopped the little rodent rascal from causing problems for Harry and his pals. While we're on the subject of objects that make no sense, let's talk about the moving portraits at Hogwarts. If the portraits are free to move around and are capable of feelings such as boredom and fear, does that mean they're alive? Have the wizards and witches in question been given a second life? It doesn't make sense. Heck, we all saw Dumbledore move on to the afterlife in the Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
So how could he be living inside a portrait in The Cursed Child? Surely he didn't get bored up in heaven and then decide to come back as a painting? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Hogwarts might sound like the most fun place in the world, but is it the most practical school? For a start, the school needs to get with the times. Seriously, the medieval aesthetic is awesome and shouldn't be changed by any means. Who doesn't want to attend a school that has magical paintings and its own house ghosts, am I right? But maybe they could let the students write with normal pens and pencils as opposed to quills with ink. That ain't too much to ask. Plus, it'd probably save the school money as they wouldn't need to keep stocking up on ink and feathers all the time. Now let's talk about the postal methods. Don't you think that sending an email would be more productive than using owls? I mean, if something bad had to happen to the birds en route to their destination, the mail wouldn't be delivered. Of course, the wizarding world is generally resistant to keeping up with technological advancements, and Hogwarts is a testament to that mentality. That being said, the school is pretty advanced when it comes to medicine. I mean, Harry lost all of his bones and the medical staff gave him a potion that made them grow back in a few days. At the same time, they didn't have a cure for his eyesight?
Oculus Reparo. That's better, isn't it?
The glasses are part of Harry's iconic look, and we wouldn't change him for the world, but considering all the trouble he found himself in throughout the years, you'd think that he'd want to fix his vision so he wouldn't be at a disadvantage while fighting Voldemort and his goons. Hogwarts' academic curriculum is also pretty questionable. Each subject is certainly interesting in its own right, but it's hard to figure out what makes some of them essential for the students. I mean, Transfiguration teaches people some cool tricks, but are students really going to go on to find jobs that require them to turn random objects into mice? Probably not unless they decide to open their own pet stores anyway. Arithmancy, Muggle studies, and care for magical creatures are useful for students who might have specific plans in those fields after they graduate. But why is astronomy considered an essential subject and arithmancy isn't? Lots of people go on to work with numbers, but astronomy is a more niche field. It's also weird how the students didn't receive any substantial physical education at Hogwarts. Unless they were among the elite few who qualified for the house Quidditch teams, they just weren't required to exercise, but they did get to stuff their faces every single day in the Great Hall.
Do you ever stop eating?
I'm hungry.
I guess the teachers at Hogwarts weren't all that concerned about health and fitness. Then again, I suppose the subjects on offer aren't more counterproductive for children's futures than dying. Let's face it, peeps, Hogwarts ain't that safe. Whether it's giant snakes putting the students into comas or epic battles costing lots of young lives, you really wonder why parents let their kids attend this school. Those are just some of the most extreme examples. However, let's not forget that everyday life at the school sees the students exposed to mandrake plants and given flying lessons, which are dangerous in their own right. Just ask poor Neville Longbottom about the downside of flying lessons. Of course, that's all part of the fun and excitement of the Harry Potter saga, but when you look at it from a practical point of view, it makes you question why the school wasn't shut down years ago. Do you remember when the Ministry of Magic said Dumbledore was unfit to be the headmaster of Hogwarts? Like me, it probably made you say things like, "Shut up and leave Dumbledore alone!" But we shouldn't let our blind loyalty to Albus get in the way of his poor decisions. He really wasn't the best headmaster at all. Let's look at the facts. In addition to failing to protect the students from basilisks, he also hired some bad teachers. At worst, they posed an active threat to the students. Take Professor Quirrell, for example. The dude brought trolls into the school, tried to kill Harry, and let Voldemort live on his head.
Bravery. Your parents had it too.
Others were just flat out incompetent. Lockhart was an egotistical pretty boy who couldn't teach defense against the dark arts for the life of him. According to author J.K. Rowling, Dumbledore hired him so kids could learn what not to do in a sticky situation. But was that a wise decision considering most of the students hadn't even learned the basic spells needed to protect them from harm? Even good teachers like Lupin and Mad-Eye Moody were questionable choices. After all, Lupin turned out to be a werewolf who lost control of his inhibitions whenever he entered beast mode, and Moody was a loose cannon with some unusual disciplinary techniques.
Sonny! I teach you to curse someone when their back is turned. You stinking, cowardly, stomach.
There's even a case to be made that Snape shouldn't have been hired in the first place. He was a Death Eater at the end of the day. Sure, Dumbledore's trustworthiness paid off in the end, but it was still a risky bet. Can you imagine a real-life headmaster giving a job to a criminal just because he snitched on his old colleagues? That would be outrage at the PTA meetings. What's worse is that Dumbledore could have modified the curriculum to make students more capable of defending themselves from the threats that fell upon Hogwarts. Instead of hiring incompetent fools like Lockhart, why not give that position to someone who could teach them how to fight against giants, trolls, giant reptiles, and the other creatures that wreaked havoc on their lives? Dumbledore even willingly let danger enter the school. The Triwizard Tournament put Harry and Cedric into harm's way by having them face off against dragons, mermaids, and other threats. Why would he allow such an event to take place at his school? Especially when there was a bunch of Death Eaters on the loose just waiting for an opportunity to strike Harry. And come to think of it, the tournaments didn't make much sense either. It's made clear that the students will have to see it through until the end, but what happens if they refuse? It's just sort of stated that the participants have binding contracts. That's the end of that conversation. Is it like the unbreakable vow where someone dies if they break their promise? Who knows? But at least we got to see Dumbledore sprint like a man half his age.
I protest! Harry, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
No, sir.
You asked one of the oldest students to do it for you?
No, sir.
You're absolutely sure?
Yes, sir.
There's no denying that Dumbledore is one of the best characters in the history of pop culture, but he did make some poor decisions in his time as the headmaster of Hogwarts. What are some other things about the Harry Potter franchise that don't make a whole lot of sense? Let us know. And while you're here, why not check out our deep dive into the history of Horcruxes? Thanks for being awesome.